The night it all fell apart. Ethan felt like the world had closed in on him. First came the call from his manager, cold, rehearsed words about cutbacks and nothing personal. Just like that, 10 years at the factory were gone. His hands, one steady from years of labor, trembled as he packed his things into a cardboard box. Tools he had bought with his own money. Photos of Nolan and Tessa, taped to the inside of his locker. All of it carried out under the silent stares of co-workers who didn't dare meet his eyes. When he stepped through his front door, hoping for comfort, he found something far worse. Mario was waiting, her arms crossed, her eyes tired, almost decided. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words cut deeper than any scream could. "You're worthless now. I'm taking the kids." Ethan's breath caught. The weight of those words crushed him more than losing the job ever could. In one night, he had lost his identity, his purpose, his family. He stood frozen as she packed bags for Nolan and Tessa, their small voices asking questions he couldn't bring himself to answer. And then the door closed. The sound echoed in the empty house like a final judgment. Ethan sank into the couch, staring at the shadows on the wall. Hours passed, though he didn't notice. The silence was heavy, pressing down on him, until finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his coat, stepped outside, and walked. No destination, no plan, just a man stripped of everything, wandering into the night. The night air was sharp, biting against Ethan's skin as he walked with no sense of direction. Streetlights hummed above him, their glow flickering on cracked pavement. His breath rose in faint clouds, disappearing as quickly as they came. He didn't know how long he'd been walking, only that his feet kept moving, because standing still felt unbearable. And then, like a beacon in the dark, he saw it. A small diner at the corner of an empty street, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the night. The windows glowed warm and golden, cutting to the cold like a promise. Ethan pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming softly, and stepped inside. The diner smelled of coffee and grilled bacon, the kind of scents that usually meant comfort. Tonight, they felt almost foreign, like reminders of a world that no longer belonged to him. A jukebox in the corner played some old tune barely audible over the clink of plates. A waitress wiped down the counter, glanced up at him, and gave a polite nod before returning to her work. Ethan slid into a booth near the window. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, eyes hollow, face pale, shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had finally broken him. He pressed his hands together, trying to steady them, but the tremor wouldn't stop. That's when he noticed him. An old man, maybe late 70s, walked slowly across the diner, leaning on a cane. His clothes were worn but clean, his movements deliberate. Without asking, he lowered himself into the seat across from Ethan. For a moment, Ethan just stared, confused. The man studied him with sharp, tired eyes. Then he said quietly, almost as if he were speaking to himself, "You look just like him." Ethan frowned. "I'm sorry, what?" The old man shook his head, blinking as if pulling himself back from some distant memory. "My son. You look like my boy. He disappeared 35 years ago. Haven't seen him since." Ethan didn't know what to say. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure if he should correct him, get up, or just listen. Something in the man's voice, something heavy, filled with grief, kept him from leaving. The old man smiled sadly. "For a second there, I thought you'd finally come home." Ethan lowered his eyes, a lump forming in his throat. He didn't know this man. And yet, in that booth, two strangers sat across from each other, both carrying a loss too heavy to speak out loud. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was a kind of silence that binds, unspoken but undeniable. For the first time that night, Ethan felt less alone. As Ethan sat across from the old man, something in his words stirred a memory, like dust shaken off a long-forgotten photograph. The face of his father came back to him, rough hands scarred by years of labor, oil-stained nails that never truly came clean. His father had been a mechanic, not rich, not powerful, but steady. Ethan could almost hear the clatter of tools in the garage, the smell of gasoline and sweat heavy in the air. His father's voice, calm but firm, would echo through the walls. "Son, A man isn't measured by what he has in his pockets, but by whether his family can lean on him when the storms hit. And then there was his mother, gentle, patient, her laughter like soft music filling their small kitchen. She would hum while stirring a pot on the stove, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes always carrying a quiet kind of hope. Back then, life was simple. Their house wasn't big, their clothes weren't new, but the walls were filled with something Ethan didn't realize was rare until it was gone: security. Love that didn't need to be spoken every minute, because it was woven into every act. His father taught him resilience. Engines break, so do people, but with enough patience and work, most things can be fixed. His mother taught him tenderness. Don't forget, Ethan, strength without kindness is just another kind of weakness. Those lessons had been the backbone of his childhood, and yet, as Ethan grew older, the world pulled him away from them. Bills, work, responsibility, the never-ending climb for more. Somewhere along the way, the man who was taught patience began losing his temper. The boy who was taught kindness became bitter, snapping at the people he loved most. He wondered what his father would think now if he could see him. A man sitting in a diner, stripped of his job, his wife, his children. Would his father shake his head in disappointment? Or would he place that same oil-stained hand on his shoulder and remind him that even broken things could be repaired? Ethan pressed his palms against the table, his breath unsteady. For the first time in years, he felt the sting of shame, not the kind Mario's words gave him, but the deeper kind, the one that came from realizing he had strayed far from who he was raised to be. His father used to say, "A storm will test the roof you built, but it's in the storm you'll know whether you build it right." Ethan thought about his home, now shattered, his marriage collapsed, his children taken. He hadn't just lost everything. He had failed to protect what mattered most. The old man across from him shifted, sipping his coffee, eyes distant. And Ethan realized something. This stranger wasn't the only one haunted by the past. He was too. The echoes of his childhood were no longer just memories. They were reminders, warnings, and maybe, just maybe, a guide back to the man he was meant to be. Before everything fell apart, there was Marielle. Ethan could still remember the first time he saw her. She wasn't the kind of woman who commanded a room with loudness or bold colors. No, Marielle carried a different kind of beauty, the kind that lingered in the details. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she laughed. The way her eyes softened when she listened, as if she truly heard what you were saying. Back then, Ethan had nothing, just a beat-up car, a few dollars from his paycheck, and callous hands that smelled like metal and grease. But when Marielle looked at him, he felt like more than enough. She saw something beyond the surface. She made him believe he could build a life worth living. Their love was simple at first. Long walks in the park, late-night conversations in his old truck, sharing fries at diners like this one. When they married, it wasn't about money or comfort. It was about the dream of a family, a home filled with warmth, laughter, and love. For a while, that dream felt real. The birth of Nolan, their first child, made Ethan feel a pride so big he thought his chest might burst. Holding that tiny hand, he swore he would never fail him. And when Tessa came along with her wide eyes and endless curiosity, Ethan thought his life was complete. But life has a way of testing promises. The small apartment became crowded. Bills piled up faster than paychecks could cover. Ethan worked double shifts, then triple, coming home with aching bones and little energy left for conversation. He told himself he was doing it for them, for Marielle, for the kids. But while he was out trying to build their future, the present began to crack. Marielle grew restless. What had once felt like a partnership began to feel like a prison. She wanted more than scraping by. She wanted dinners where she didn't have to count every penny. She wanted vacations, laughter, a husband who wasn't always too tired to notice her sadness. Arguments began quietly at first. A sigh when he forgot to fix the leaky faucet. A sharp tone when he left his boots by the door. But soon, the air between them was filled with words that cut deep. "You're never here, Ethan. I'm working myself to the bone for you. I don't want bones, Ethan. I want a husband. I want a life." The warmth that wants to find their home turned cold. Nights of laughter turned into nights of silence, where they lay side by side but felt miles apart. Ethan tried. He really did. He bought her flowers once, but she barely smiled. He planned a weekend trip, but by then, her mind was already elsewhere. The woman who had once looked at him like he was everything now looked at him like he was a burden. And yet, through it all, their children remained his anchor. Nolan's shy smile when Ethan tucked him in. Tessa's excited stories about school. Those moments reminded Ethan of why he worked so hard, why he endured the distance growing between him and Marielle. But Marielle, she was slipping away. One night, during another argument that ended with her storming into the bedroom, Ethan stood in the kitchen staring at the cracked linoleum floor. And in that silence, a truth he did want to face settled in his chest. The woman who once saved him was now preparing to leave him. The fracture wasn't sudden. It was slow, quiet, and inevitable, like a foundation crumbling beneath a house, until one day, the whole thing gives way. And deep down, Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. The day it all shattered didn't start with thunder. It started like any other. Ethan woke up before sunrise, drank his coffee black, and drove to the factory. The hum of machines was familiar, almost comforting. For years, he believed this place would carry him through life. Steady work, steady pay, enough to keep food on the table. But that morning, something felt off. The supervisors whispered more than usual. The plant manager's office door stayed shut. And when Ethan was called in just before lunch, he already knew. The man across the desk couldn't even look him in the eye. "I'm sorry, Ethan. The company's downsizing. Your position, it's been eliminated." Just like that. Years of sweat, of skip holidays, of overtime shifts, erased in a single sentence. They handed him a cardboard box for his belongings. He walked the factory floor one last time, the sound of machines echoing like laughter at his expense. Co-workers avoided his eyes. Some gave pitying nods. Others pretended not to notice. Ethan carried that box out like a coffin. Inside, just a few personal items. A framed picture of Nolan and Tessa, his old wrench set, a mug that said "World's Okayest Dad." That was it. His whole career, his whole identity, reduced to scraps. The drive home felt endless. The box sat in the passenger seat, silent and heavy, like a cruel reminder. He rehearsed what he'd say to Marielle, but every version felt wrong. When he walked to the front door, she was waiting, not with concern, not with comfort, but with eyes already hardened, as if she'd been preparing for this moment. "You're home early," she said flatly. "They let me go," Ethan admitted, setting the box down. "They said downsizing. Nothing I could do." For a moment, there was silence, a chance for her to step forward, to hold him, to tell him they'd figure out together. But instead, Marielle's jaw tightened. "Of course," she muttered. "Of course this would happen." Her words cut deeper than the factory's notice. "Marielle," she snapped. Years of resentment poured out at once. "Do you know what it's like, Ethan? To feel stuck? To watch everyone else move forward while I'm drowning in this tiny life you call enough? You couldn't even keep a job. What good are you now?" He stood frozen, each word striking like a hammer. He tried to speak, to explain, but she wasn't finished. "I can't do this anymore. I can't raise the kids in a house built on nothing but failure. You're worthless, Ethan. I'm taking Nolan and Tessa to my mother's." The words "worthless" echoed in his head, louder than the machines, louder than the silence that followed. And then she was gone. The sound of the door slamming was final, absolute. Ethan stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the empty space where his family used to be. His box of belongings sat on the floor, mocking him. The house that once held dreams now held nothing but echoes. No job, no wife, no kids. Just Ethan, alone. And in that suffocating silence, he realized this was a breaking point. The night he truly lost everything. Ethan thought he had buried the past. The mistakes, the betrayals, the faces of people he had hurt. He thought they'd been left behind when he walked away from his old life. But the past doesn't stay buried. It waits, silent, patient, and then returns when you least expect it. One evening, as he walked the quiet streets, he saw someone he hadn't seen in years, Daniel, his childhood friend, the one person who had once trusted him the most, and the one Ethan had betrayed in pursuit of greed and selfishness. Daniel's eyes burned with anger the moment they met Ethan's. "You!" Daniel spat. "After everything you did, you still have the nerve to show your face?" Ethan froze. Shame crawled over his skin like fire. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that he had changed, but he couldn't. His voice failed him. His heart carried too much guilt. The confrontation didn't end in violence, but Daniel's words struck harder than any fist could. "You can repent all you want," Daniel said coldly, "but forgiveness? That's not mine to give. You'll carry what you've done until your last breath." And with that, Daniel walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the dark street. For the first time, Ethan realized that redemption was not a destination. It was a path, a lifelong struggle. He could change his actions today. He could help strangers. He could build something better. But the scars of his past would never fully disappear. As Ethan stood in the silence, he whispered to himself, "I can't undo what I've done, but I can choose what I become." And in that moment, he understood this journey wasn't about erasing the man he once was. It was about becoming strong enough to live with him. Ethan's new life was fragile. Every day felt like walking on a thin rope. One wrong step, and he could fall back into the man he used to be, and then temptation returned. A wealthy businessman approached him one afternoon. The man had heard of Ethan's sharp mind and persuasive talent. He offered Ethan a position, high pay, high status, but with one catch: the job required deception, selling lies, manipulating people for profit. The kind of life Ethan had sworn to leave behind. For a brief moment, Ethan felt the old hunger awaken, the promise of power, money, and recognition, the thrill of control. It was intoxicating, like a ghost of his former self whispering, "You miss me, don't you?" He imagined what it would be like to return to that world. No more struggling, no more shame, just wealth and admiration. But then he remembered the faces of the people he had hurt. He remembered Daniel's burning eyes, full of hatred. He remembered the quiet nights when guilt crushed him like stone. And suddenly he knew the truth. The offer wasn't a chance. It was a trap, a chain disguised as freedom. Ethan looked the man in the eye and shook his head. "No, I've lived that life before. It destroyed me. I won't go back." The businessman smirked, almost amused. "Suit yourself." But not many men can resist the world when it comes knocking. As the man walked away, Ethan felt both relief and pain. Relief because he had chosen the right path. Pain because he knew resisting temptation wasn't a victory that lasted forever. It was a battle he would have to fight again and again. And deep down, he asked himself, how many times can I keep saying no before I finally break? Ethan thought he had control. He thought resisting temptation once meant he was free. But the truth? The past doesn't let go so easily. One night, as he walked home from a late shift, he found himself standing outside a bar. Inside, laughter and music spilled into the street. The same kind of place where his old self would thrive, drinking, scheming, making promises he never intended to keep. He stood there, frozen. His chest tightened. A storm of voices fought in his head. "Go inside. Just one drink. You've earned it. No, don't. One drink becomes 10. 10 becomes disaster." His hand trembled on the door handle. For a terrifying moment, he almost gave in, almost stepped back into the darkness. And then his phone buzzed. It was a message from his sister. "Ethan, proud of you. Don't stop fighting. I see the man you're becoming." The words hit him harder than any drink ever could. Tears burned his eyes as he stepped back in the bar and walked away into the night. That was his breaking point. Not because he fell, but because he realized how close he came, how fragile he truly was. And yet, for the first time, he didn't feel weak for walking away. He felt strong. Stronger than the man he used to be. Ethan whispered into the darkness, "I'm not who I was. Not anymore." But deep inside, he knew the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning, Ethan woke with a weight pressing down on his chest. Not the fog of alcohol, but the memory of how close he came to falling back. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, his hands clenched into fists. Doubt whispered in his ear, "What if you're not strong enough? What if you fail again? What if Mariel never lets you see Nolan and Tessa?" The questions cut like knives. But then another voice, quieter, steadier, rose inside him. "You almost lost them once. Don't let fear make you lose them again." Ethan stood, breathing hard, as if pushing against an invisible wall. He realized something important. Fighting for his children wasn't about winning back Mariel. It wasn't about proving his worth to the world. It was about showing Nolan and Tessa that their father would not vanish. He remembered Harlan's 5 words echoing in his head. "Don't abandon them like me." Those words had become a promise, a vow he could not break. Ethan pulled on his worn jacket and stepped outside. The air was cold, but it filled his lungs with fire. He whispered to himself, as if sealing the decision with every breath, "I will fight, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with love." And in that moment, something shifted. The broken man who once wandered the streets aimlessly was gone. In his place stood a father, ready to begin the hardest battle of his life. The diner lights flickered softly as Ethan slid out of the booth. Harlan sat across from him, leaning back, his eyes heavy with years. For a moment, they just looked at each other. 2 men bound by loss, yet separated by choices. Ethan felt a deep gratitude swell in his chest. He reached out his hand. "Thank you," he said, voice steady. Harlan gripped it firmly, though his hands trembled. "Don't thank me, son. Just do better than I did." There was no need for more words. The silence carried everything. Regret, warning, hope. Ethan walked to the door and paused. Outside, the night stretched wide and uncertain, but it no longer felt like a void. It felt like a road waiting to be walked. For the first time in months, maybe years, he didn't feel small, didn't feel invisible. He wasn't walking out as the man who lost his job, not as the husband who was left behind. He was walking out as a father, a man with something still worth fighting for. The bell above the diner door jingled softly as he stepped into the cold night. His breath clouded the air, and he pulled his jacket tighter. But his steps were different now. Not heavy, not hollow. Every stride was a promise. A vow whispered into the darkness. "I will not abandon them." And with that, Ethan disappeared into the night, not as a broken man, but as a father ready to reclaim his children and himself.